Let me explain what's been asked. Okay. So there's, so very famously, Matthew has, and Matthew does this, no other gospel writer does this the way Matthew does this, and that is he has fulfillment citations. There are 11 very notable ones where we are told that Jesus did this and this, or this, and this is to fulfill what was spoken of the Lord by the prophet saying. And we have a whole bunch of those, and some of them are really quite famous. They're all scandalous. I mean, none of them are benign. They're all like, wow. It doesn't say anything remotely like that. The words have been, the meanings of the words have been changed, and they're always ripped out of context violently. And some of them you don't even know. But let's deal with one that's the famous one, which I think everybody knows about. Okay. And you'll see why. So first of all, there is no concept of dual fulfillment in Tanakh. Because theoretically, if there were, then everything is possible. Then no religion could be dismissed. You'll say, well, this text has nothing to do with it. Well, it's going to be fulfilled twice. Well, then on what basis could any claim be dismissed? Then anything is possible. You follow? So but I want to walk you through this here. And then I'm going to show you, but I want to show you the very interesting part of this, so just hang on for this. This is very interesting. So, for instance, famously, we are told, out of all the books, the 27 books in the Christian Bible, only 2 of them have an infancy narrative. We are told that Jesus was conceived miraculously to a virgin named Mary in the city of Bethlehem, and that's Matthew and Luke. As I said, Matthew, unlike the other Gospels, will go, this is not an arbitrary event, but it actually was foretold in the Jewish scriptures, this is Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, that in fact Isaiah prophesies that the Messiah, that behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel. That's how it reads in Matthew. It's multiply, first of all, mistranslated. The text now in every Christian Bible, it will tell you, is very famous. It will say this text can be found in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Now what most of you probably know is if we go to Isaiah 7:14, what we encounter just immediately is we don't, the key word here is a virgin conceiving, okay? Well, virgins don't conceive unless it's a leopard shark in the Bahamas, right? We always read about this parthenogenesis. Okay, so we're looking for this, I mean, that's the whole thing. It hangs on this word that appears nearly 150 times in Tanakh called a virgin, a betulah, okay? This is a word that's, because virginity is very important in Tanakh, so it's everywhere. And that word appears in the book of Isaiah 5 times. So we would, if you were a Christian, you definitely would want to find that word there. But as you would suspect, it isn't found there. The Hebrew text says, Hine ha'alma hora, behold, the young woman, hora, is pregnant. It's the perfect tense, which means she already conceived. V'yeledes bein, and she will bear a son. V'karas shemai, and she will call, not they will call. The New Testament will change the third person pronoun because Mary never called him Emmanuel. In fact, she's instructed in the book of Luke to call him Jesus, not Emmanuel. So that's why Matthew changed that pronoun. And she, the karos, that's the feminine, third person feminine, and she will call his name Emmanuel, which means, and it doesn't say it in Isaiah, that they'll call him Emmanuel. If you go to chapter 8, you understand why he's called Emmanuel. Okay. So the problem, the mistranslations are like pow. And this is the absolute classic text. And it's obviously very striking, the virgin conceiving, it's blatant. And it is important to know that in the Hebrew language, both biblical and modern Hebrew, there is only one way to convey the word virgin. Only one way to say the word virgin, and that's the word betulah. And the word, and it's important, well, maybe betulah, virgin, and young women, they are like similar, like young woman, virgin, Well, no, it's actually young women who have babies as opposed to old women. It's just the opposite. It's young women who are having loads of babies, not old women. So that's not true, but they actually mean 2 different things. Virginity describes someone's sexual history. Young woman that tells us about her age and her gender. So they are not remotely the same. But what is even more appalling about this supposed fulfillment is the context. Again, Christians, they never learn this. But you go to a Christian and say, Isaiah 7:14. You know that verse by heart, don't you? No, sure do. Could you just name one verse between Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1 through 13 by heart? Do you know anything that introduces that verse? Unless that person is an extremely studious Christian, they're not going to have an idea. They're going to say, hand me a Bible. How do you know 14 and nothing else? You know the answer. How dangerous is it to read any chapter in any book, let alone a holy book, and start with the 13th verse? It's a disaster, okay? The context is, and this is where everything collapses. The context is that there was a civil war that took place some 2,730, 39 years ago, approximately. Approximately. Okay, so, and what happened was that at that time, the land of Israel was divided into two parts. You had the southern kingdom which is called either the southern kingdom, which is everything Jerusalem and south, okay? And then you had the northern kingdom, essentially, which is everything above Jerusalem, okay? There was a civil war. The civil war began immediately after the death of King Solomon. I'm not going to go into why, but the land of Israel was divided into two kingdoms. Eventually, the Assyrians would come and they would destroy the entire northern kingdom. Many, many Jews from the northern kingdom fled south, read 2 Chronicles 32, verse 11 and 12, and actually joined the rest of the people. So among us, there are many, many Jews from Asher, from Naphtali. It says it openly. They said, I'm out of here. Okay. Now, the context is that the northern kingdom often went to war with the southern kingdom. And this was the case in Isaiah chapter 7. And an alliance was created. An alliance was the northern kingdom, it's called the kingdom of Israel, or the northern kingdom. Those terms are completely interchangeable. Allied itself with Syria. I just want to say it very carefully, Syria. What I don't want you to think is Assyria. That is totally different. Assyria at the time was the world power, was the absolute world superpower. That would end. But at that time, Assyria was the superpower. So Judah, under Ahaz, aligns itself with the superpower, with the big cheese. Syria, Aram, whose king is Ritzin, allies himself with Pekach ben Ramalyahu, who is the king of the northern kingdom of Israel. So you have an alliance. The northern kingdom of Israel, the top part of the land of Israel, allies itself with Syria, a very ancient country. They form an alliance, and they really don't like the idea that the southern kingdom has formed an alliance with Assyria. And they therefore came south to go to war and destroy the Davidic kingdom. God cannot permit them to succeed. The king of the time is Ahaz, who I mentioned, who is one of the most, if not the most wicked king of the Jewish people. He was evil beyond your wildest imagination. He ruled for 16 years. I can't even go into what he did, but if I did, you'd fall off your chair. Now, what happens is, so now Ahaz is in a lot of trouble. He has two armies surrounding Yerushalayim. Imagine that. You have two massive armies surrounding you. You don't have a chance. But Ahaz was wicked, and he certainly was not looking for God to save him. It was like the Marcoses, they just want to get out, with the shoes or without the shoes, but they want out. And Isaiah, now God, the Almighty, blessed be his holy name, has to keep a promise. Ahaz did not deserve to be saved. But Hashem made a promise to King David, as I mentioned earlier in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16, that no matter what happens, even if you'll have children, it says it openly, even if your children are wicked, they'll come out of you, I will punish them personally, but I will never take away the kingdom from them. Which means that God had an IOU note to fulfill. He had to save Achaz from this, what would have been impending doom. Okay? Now, Isaiah approaches Achaz, things look terrible, okay? And now this is what, if you read Isaiah chapter 7, verse 1 through 13, this is exactly what you're going to read, okay? Now, what Christians want us to believe is the following. So Isaiah is coming to Achaz and goes, Achaz, I know things look really lousy right now. And you don't got you don't have a hope of any of that. But God is going to save you. And Achaz goes, he feigns piety and goes, I don't want to test the Lord. Yeah, right, I want out of here. What's happening? No, let me explain to you. Behold the young woman. He's pointing to Isaiah's own wife. They meet at a washer's field. You have to go back to Isaiah chapter 7, verse 4. And the young woman, who is Isaiah's wife, she is going to bear a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. And if you go to verse 15 and 16, that means go to the next two verses after this famous verse, 15, 16 says there, and before that child knows to reject bad and choose good, he'll already be eating cream and honey, which means the war will be over. And if we go to the book of Kings, we see that these two kings were assassinated. It was if you're not thoroughly familiar with these passages, you'd never even know about it, okay? Here, okay. So this creates an absolute impossible situation. It's one thing if Christians want to say that says, it's true, Alma is not the typical word that you say virgin, but this is the Parthenos, and there's a... But now you've got another insurmountable problem. The problem is that let's just play make-believe. Let's make believe. Let's forget about the fact that it doesn't say virgin, okay? Let's make believe. Okay, let's just ignore that, okay? So I'll just grant it. We'll just play, I don't see that, okay? And now, so let's make sense out of this, okay? So this occurs 2,700 years ago, which means 700 years before Christianity began. So this is what you have to buy into to go to church. You have to believe that Isaiah is going to Achaz and say, hey, buddy, I know things look pretty bad, huh? Bleak? Yeah, I know. But I got good news for you. I'll tell you, here's the good news. In 700 years from now, this must have been really comforting. I could just see Achaz taking his bottle of Xanax and just flushing it down. I guess I won't need that anymore. I won't be needing Ambien anymore. I guess my problems are done. Zoloft, we could chuck that because my problems are done. No more panic attacks. That's all. 700 years, I'm going to be okay? Sure, that's fine. Yeah, we could just flush down the absolute. We don't need that. We're gonna live, you know. I could just see my life insurance premium just going straight diving. So you're laughing because it's absolutely preposterous. What source of comfort could it possibly be to Achaz that in the 7 centuries these two kingdoms are going to be destroyed? And we actually know it happened then. It only makes sense that it happened then. So forget this is like Christians go, really? And just say, please, just take a moment, use your King James Bible and read the first 13 verses. Please read it. And then if I got something wrong, please tell me where I got it wrong, okay? And if this is talking about Jesus, so you're telling me that this child is Jesus who's going to be born. And before Jesus, we're going to put Jesus in instead of the word child. We'll substitute it. And that before Jesus was eating cream and honey. Jesus knew to reject bad and choose good before he was eating cream and honey. And these two kings would be destroyed. Okay? Could you tell me which two kings were in the time of Jesus that had Jerusalem under siege? Like, who were they, and when exactly did Jesus mature? Meaning rejecting bad. When did children mature enough to know to reject bad and choose good? Whatever. When exactly did Jesus mature? So that's the sign. The sign isn't the conception or birth. The sign is the maturity of the child. Verse 15 and 16. And this becomes just, it just becomes. So now you're probably wondering, well, what do Christians do with this? Right? I mean, Christians somebody noticed this. Okay, so they actually do something. They do? Well, they do. And this is where this gentleman's question comes in. They go, dual prophecy, which means it is granted that the context demands that the events we encounter in Isaiah chapter 7 happened 2,700 years ago, and there was a child born then, but there was a dual prophecy, and there will be another child who will be born 700 years later, and that child, of course, is Matthew. Because if they don't do that, that means Matthew lied. And if Matthew lied, then the credibility of the New Testament collapses, and then Christianity dives with it. Then it's over. Then that's it. This is an existential problem. If Matthew lied about Isaiah, then the credibility of the entire New Testament collapses. What I'm saying right now is unassailable, is just really very straightforward. So what they're saying is dual prophecy. The idea of a dual prophecy is completely invented. There is no such thing. You would only have to invent these ideas in order to get out of these impossible situations. It's obviously torturous, and it's fatuous. But I didn't go through all this just to teach you this. I want to show you something really cool, something interesting that I think will be very meaningful to Christians who use this argument. And this is where I wanted to go with this. And that is, oh really? Dual prophecy? So this is counterintuitive, but I want to show you how you really could, because what you're trying to do is get someone to really think it through. Because they say Christians are really, not all, but Christians generally, they're nice people. This is what they're here every week in every Bible class. That's all they're hammered with. That's all they know. Now listen carefully. This is here comes the rub. Let's go down a track that most Christians just never thought about. I'll concede it. Good. I will concede that there's a possibility of dual prophecy for the sake of making a point. What does the word Alma mean again in Isaiah 7:14? You ask the Christian, they'll say, oh, that word means a virgin. Okay, good. Okay, and you're telling me that there's a dual prophecy, which means that there were two virgins who conceived and had a child. One 2,700 years ago, and another virgin conceived 2,000 years ago. Please, pray tell. Tell me, who was this virgin 2,700 years ago who conceived and had a baby boy? Conversation over. Got it? It's a wow. Isn't that a wow? So you see, it's so easy to be a follower of the Jewish faith. The wonderful thing about being a Jew is, being a follower of Judaism is, that you're telling the truth. You have the truth on your side. It's Tyrus is emes. It's emes is truth. Aleph, the first letter of the Aleph base. Mem, middle letter, Tuf, the end. It's all true. And when you're telling the truth, you don't have to worry. When you're making stuff up, what happens is you always are in trouble because you lie here and then it suddenly comes here. When you start, it just evolves into this crazy cacophony of lies, and then it just becomes, but this is the way to answer it is properly, meaning because what we're interested in, we're not interested in mocking Christians. That's the last thing we want to do, is we want them to just think for a moment. And the way to do it sometimes is counterintuitive and say, okay, I'll concede it. I won't even talk about it doesn't say virgin. Look at the context. Dual prophecy, I won't even talk about the fact that, so it's very counterintuitive. They just never thought this way. Good, okay, there's a dual prophecy, fine. Please tell me who was the first virgin. That means it happened twice. And the word Betula means, the word Alma means a virgin. That means there's the first virgin and the second virgin. Who was the first virgin? I mean, Jesus wasn't the first virgin to be born, the first child of a virgin to be born. Who was the first one? Then it's that person will lead the church on the spot.